Our speaker tonight is Ron Nieberge. Did you laugh? No. Sharing the outdoor world with folks, either here through his photography or in person through his photography tours and workshops, is why he loves photography. And all that love started in the mid-1970s at age 12. So you can tell he's a little younger. When Ron's family moved from San Diego to interior Alaska in the area now known as Wrangell San Elias National Park. Their move to this vast wilderness developed two passions that have stayed with Ron to this day: his love of the outdoors and his desire to capture the beauty of the natural world in photographs. Taking the extraordinary and using beautiful natural light to create the extraordinary has been a passion of Ron's for many years, and his love of Alaska is readily apparent. Since 1992, Ron and his wife Janine have called Seward, Alaska home. In 2002, Ron, along with his wife Janine, decided to follow Ron's passion for photography on a full-time basis, leaving comfortable corporate jobs for the unknown world of professional photographer. And they have never looked back. Ron leads many photo tours, taking guests to his favorite places in his home state of Alaska and throughout the US and Antarctica at the best time of the year, taking advantage of his knowledge of the areas and his many years as a professional photographer. Tonight, Ron's going to talk to us about animalscapes, wildlife plus landscape. Please join me in welcoming Ron. Yeah.
And now that I've figured out how to share my screen correctly, I have to unshare to allow Ron to take over.
Okay, well, great. Thanks so much for the introduction, Connie. Can everybody hear me okay? I think?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Perfect. Well, yeah, this is my first Zoom call. We winter in Arizona on some remote property, and we haven't had Wi-Fi until now. And thanks to Starlink, we have Wi-Fi. So I'm kind of late to the Zoom party, but I'm going to give this a whirl. So hopefully it'll go. As Connie said, this is I entitled this Animalscapes, and I think one of the nice things about this presentation is you don't have to have a big fancy camera to utilize these techniques. An iPhone is all you need. And I think one of the other neat things about these techniques is I find that a lot of the great photos that win contests these days, it's not enough just to have a portrait. Now you need to have include the environment, you need to include light, you need to include so much more. So I feel like an animalscapes style is really helpful for making more compelling imagery.
Yeah.
All right, so I think we're good to go. As Connie mentioned, we for a long time made our living as a stock and assignment photographer, and this is kind of my attempt to gain some credibility with the audience and showing some of my covers. But for many years, we made stock and photography was our sole source of income. I would take the images, and my wife Janine would market them, send them to the agencies and that type of thing. In fact, I'm kind of grateful for Texas. When we were first starting out, it was kind of a struggle. We traveled all around Alaska and photographed different areas. And then we took a trip to Texas where we watched some college basketball games. And afterwards, I did a little photography around San Antonio. And those photos just sold and sold and sold like mad. And that's when we realized if we traveled outside of Alaska, we had a real shot of making a living at this. So I'm always indebted to our trip to Texas because of that. Right now, our home is Seward, Alaska. This is not taken too far from our home with some northern lights. This is kind of right outside our house. And for many years, what we would do is travel. We would travel for a couple of months, gathering photographs all over the West, in Canada, in different places. And then after 2 months, we would return home to Seward and process images and send them back out to our agencies. So it was a really good life, a lot of fun. This is the Grand Tetons, of people that probably recognize that. For the last 30 years and up until today, we still call Seward our home. And I'm always curious, normally I ask how many people at show of hands have been to Seward, usually a surprising number, despite the small size of the town. But I won't do that today since I can't see anybody's hands. But it's a pretty little coastal town. we're surrounded by Chugach National Forest and Kenai Fjords National Park, which is absolutely got some stunning scenery. About 10, 12 years ago, as the stock photography and assignment photography started tapering off, we transitioned and started doing photo tours. And as Connie mentioned, so we operate under the name Alaska Photo Tours. And I'll just touch on these briefly, and then I'll get to the main part of the show here. So I do trips throughout Alaska in Lake Clark National Park for a number of bear trips, for example. This is in Lake Clark National Park. Our trips for 2023 are all sold out, with the exception of one at Annan Bear Observatory, and we had a cancellation. So if anyone was keen, we have one spot in 2023, and soon we'll be announcing and opening up our trips for 2024. So if anyone's interested, they can contact us at Alaska Photo Tours, and happy to answer questions and that type of thing. So this is an image from Lake Clark. This is from Katmai. In fact, Chuck and Helen and Connie and David joined us on a Katmai trip a few years ago. I chartered this beautiful yacht in Southeast Alaska where we visit a number of bear viewing locations and some humpback whale viewing locations. And that's a pretty fun trip. And then I do a trip out of Seward and Kenai Fjords National Park, kind of concentrating on orcas. And then, as I mentioned, Annan, where we have black bears and brown bears fishing. And then finally, this year, November and December, I'm offering a couple Costa Rica trips on the Osa Peninsula. And I think one of those trips still has some room in it. So anyway, that's kind of our photo tours. And again, let me know if afterwards, you can send us an email if you're interested. I also guide for other folks, and I've done 6 trips down to Antarctica with Cheeseman's Ecology Tours, and I've guided some polar bear trips for friends and that type of thing. So spend a good time of the year guiding, a good part of the year guiding. We've also turned in a little bit of snowbirds. So now we have 10 acres. In fact, that's where I am right now. In the wintertime, we have this 10-acre remote piece of property in Arizona, and that's where we spend our winters, but our rest of our home is still in Seward. So enough of that. Let's get to the good stuff, and that's the animalscapes. And I've always had 2 passions when it came to photography. And it seems like a lot of photographers really are into wildlife or they're into landscapes. And you may have seen this photo. This is probably my most stolen photo. It's if I had $1 for every time it was stolen, I would be pretty wealthy. But for me, I've loved wildlife and landscape photography equally. And so I spend a good portion of my time pursuing both passions. And so here's just a few wildlife images. And just in case you don't know what a landscape image is, I'll throw in a couple of those as well. This is in Chugach National Forest, not far from Seward. And wintertime can be just equally as busy or beautiful. And that's Denali National Park, way out west by Wonder Lake. So when I think of combining the two, and I didn't come up with this name, I didn't coin the name, but I've heard other people use it in basically the term landscape, kind of a landscape and wildlife. And to start with, I'll give you a couple examples. This is a doll sheep in Polychrome Pass during the autumn colors. And here's a little bit of an example of why I think this is effective photography. This is a black bear with giant ears. We nicknamed him Mickey. But this was in Ayalik in Kenai Fjords National Park. And it's a really beautiful setting with mountains and a stream and beautiful morning light. And I felt like this portrait photo could have pretty much been taken almost anywhere. It could have been Yosemite or Yellowstone or the Smoky Mountains. There was nothing that set it apart, even though we were in this beautiful setting. And without really moving or doing anything, basically I just changed lenses and waited a minute and waited for the bear to emerge from the willows and captured what I think is a pretty landscape, but also with a little bit of a bear in the bottom right corner. In fact, most viewers I don't think would even spot the bear at first. They just see the pretty mountains and the pretty scenery, and then it's like, oh, look at the bear as well. So this is why I think this is a far stronger image than the image of just the bear coming out of the willows. And there's a couple other examples. Some bison in Yellowstone National Park. This was actually an outdoor photographer at one point. Here's a desert bighorn and overlooking the Colorado River and near Moab. Some grizzly bears in the fall colors in Denali. And a brown bear along the shoreline of Lake Clark. Doesn't have to be land mammals. Here's some orcas near Annan Creek Bear Observatory in Southeast. So here I included the Tongass National Forest in the background. So it can be marine mammals and land mammals and birds and everything. So I wanted to start with a few of the different techniques that I use. And the first one is probably counterintuitive. And the first technique I often find myself implementing is to back up. And let me explain a little bit about that. Here's a picture of two bull moose with Denali in the background. And I was up pretty close to these moose, and it's rut. It's a time of year that their mating's going on. So the two bulls are chasing each other back and forth. And when I was fairly close to the bulls, it was hard for me to keep the mountain in the background. And just as maybe a good example, if I held my finger out arm's length from in front of me and lined it up across the room on a door or a window, and then I moved my head just a foot to the left or the right, my finger is pointing at something drastically different. Even though I'm only moving my head, but have somebody off in the distance, maybe in front of the doorway, holding up their finger, I could move 10 feet to the left and right, and the background to my finger would remain unchanged, if that makes sense. So in this situation, I had the exact same thing going on. The bears run, or the moose, they move 10 feet, 20 feet to the left, 20 feet to the right. I couldn't keep the mountain behind them. And so what I literally did was grab my tripod and took off running away from the moose and ran about 100 yards away and then set back up. And now if you look at the image, if the moose go 20 feet this way, 20 feet that way, maybe the composition's not quite as perfect, but I still have the mountain Denali in the background, which I think this 20,000 foot mountain was a nice backdrop. So this is a little bit, normally we want to get closer, closer, closer. I find myself with the animalscape style wanting to back up more to better control the overall scene. And this is an image, similar situation. This is at Frederick Sound. I had rented a little skiff and was traveling around Southeast, photographing, doing some scouting for a photo tour. I'd spent the night in the skiff, and the next morning woke up and went into Frederick Sound, had the full moon setting, had humpback whales all around, and really wanted to get a picture with the whale and the moon and the sky in the background. And typically I would like to get kind of close to the whales because the water coming off the tail is really dramatic. But when I was close to the whales, again, if it came up 20 feet to the left or right, if I misjudged where it's going to come up, I no longer had the moon in the backdrop in the background. So literally I got in a skiff and motored away from the whales, turned back around, went with a little bit more of a telephoto, which helped compress the scene. So same with the moose, it helped compress the moose and the mountain. Here I'm compressing the whale and the moon. And then if I was off on where the whale came up, 10, 20 feet one way or the other, I still had a usable composition. So backing up is something that I often find myself doing, and it is a bit counterintuitive. Watching brown bears on the coast dig for oyster clams is really fascinating. And we often get really close to them. They all dig up a clam a different way. They open it a different way, and that's really fun. But in this situation, I decided to just back up, go with a wider angle lens, and include the pattern in the mud and the patterns in the water and that kind of thing. So in some ways, I think, I don't know if it made for a better photo, but it made for maybe a more interesting and different photo. So that's just another example of backing up and coming up with something interesting. These are king penguins, and this is South Georgia Islands. And hopefully you guys, I have a bar across my screen, hopefully that you're not seeing that. But basically where my cursor is, those are people, and that gives you kind of an idea of scale. And normally when you first see penguins, you want to get close. King penguins are beautiful animals and lots of patterns and colors, and it's really a dramatic close-up picture. But after you get your close-up pictures, to get something different, what I ended up doing in this situation is hiking around the colony and climbing up on a hillside and looking down on this particular colony. And the brown you see here are the chicks. They call them, they're year-old penguin chicks. They call them oakum boys, and they haven't fur into the final adult plumage. And so you get these really neat patterns of the chicks along with the adults. And had I not backed up and got way away from them on the hillside, you know, I wouldn't have come away with what I think is a fairly unique image. So it's another example of backing up. And here's another king penguin, a little closer so you get a little idea of what I was looking at there, the adults and the chicks. But again, backing up, I think still made for an interesting composition. And here's a final example, the polar bear. Again, we like to get close to the polar bears and be right in their face, and full frame polar bear pictures are always really neat. But as the sun was setting, again, we backed up with the boat, was able to get the sun and the orange sky in the background with the silhouette, which just makes for a very different picture. And back when the stock sailing, when I was still in selling stock, a picture like this would have a lot of benefit because it looks like it's warm. Polar bears are kind of a keystone image to climate change. So if a magazine was doing an article on climate change, this might appeal to them because it looks like a hot, sunny environment with the polar bear. So there would be some stock benefit, but I also think it just as an interesting, it just makes for an interesting image as well. Even though polar bears up close is also an interesting image. So a few examples of this technique of backing up that I think can be really helpful when you're doing your own animalscape photography. Another thing that I always think about is to include the environments. And this almost goes without saying, but some of these examples I think will help put this home. I think it helps tell the story about where an animal lives and how it survives. And in this case, this is a little Savannah sparrow, and it nests near Seward in these plants that we call lupin in Alaska, but you guys have a little different name for them, I think, in Texas. But it shows where they live and where they nest, and just kind of makes for a little bit more of an interesting picture by showing their environment and not just a close-up of the bird. I'll give you some other examples. This is a coastal brown bear near Seward, and I could have done a close-up picture with a zoom lens or a big telephoto, but I chose to include the coastal environment, the temperate rainforest, and I think just adds to the whole picture of what it's like to try to catch salmon in this type of an environment. Here's a lynx in Denali hunting looking for voles in a field that this is common hunting grounds for them. Here's a bald eagle at Annie Bear Observatory. And again, you get a feel for what their environment's like, how wet it must be for there to be all that moss and water on the moss and dripping, and just, I think, makes for a more interesting image than just a close-up of an eagle. I think weather is a really important thing to include when you're including the environment. In this case, it's snow and cold. Sometimes wind and blowing snow can be really helpful. Other times, especially say in Texas, you might have a coyote in a field with heat shimmer and heat sun coming off, or dust and wind blowing. And I think all those elements add to the image. The weather is an important part of their environment, and bad weather can make for really interesting photography, I think. What's funny about bears is most people, when they think of brown bears on the coast, they think about them catching the salmon, jumping out of the air. But most brown bears don't live where there's salmon around all that often. And even places where there are salmon, it's for a short period of summer. This is more the life of a brown bear, is just eating sedges in a meadow. They almost remind me more of cows than the quintessential bear that you might think of. And so a picture like this really kind of helps tell the story of what life's like for a coastal brown bear. And similarly, this is the southeast in the Tongass, but again, the bears will look for salmon and food maybe washing up in the ocean there, but a lot of their life is just eating grasses like that. And so including the trees and the moss and the angel fur hanging down, I think just adds to the picture and kind of shows what life's like for a coastal brown bear. And again, foggy weather, cloudy weather, all that kind of adds to the imagery, I think, in animalscapes when you try to include the environment. Probably nowhere is the environment more spectacular than Antarctica. And I mean, you look at these penguins and they're out on this giant iceberg. This is shoreline a mile or two back. And this is probably the nicest day of the year for these penguins' lives. You know, this is a midsummer day. It's like 45 degrees, no winds. Every day other than this is probably worse. And in the middle of winter time, I can't even imagine what it's like. It's snowing and blowing, and you know, for these kind of cornices to be formed and this much ice and snow, a penguin penguins picked a tough place to live, that's for certain. But by including the environment, I think it really kind of helps tell the story. I love close-up pictures of penguins, but I think this animal landscape view where you see the environment is also makes for compelling imagery. This was another one. This was kind of a funny moment. I was driving the Zodiac and we were going back and forth trying to get everybody photos of this leopard seal laying on the ice there, when all of a sudden out of the clear blue, this Gentoo penguin popped up and landed on the little iceberg. And for those that don't know, the primary food source for leopard seals is penguins. So this was kind of a oh no moment for this poor Gentoo penguin. And we all watched with interest as he looked left and looked right and then slipped back into the water. And I don't think the leopard seal ever knew he was there. But again, it gives you an idea of just what the environment's like where the leopard seal and penguins live. And one more example, some penguins in Antarctica. And this is another bear at Annan Bear Observatory. You know, I don't know if I'm spying on him or if he's spying on me, but it just gives you a feeling for the lush, dense foliage that you find in the temperate rainforest on the Alaska coast. And then finally, this is in Katmai Coast, and this is in Hallow Bay, and that's Hallow Glacier in the backgrounds. And I had a picture that's not quite as good that was taken a short time after this with a wolf walking along that beach. But not too long ago, this picture, for example, was used on the cover of Alaska Calendar. And you know, I don't think just a close-up of a bear would have ever made the calendar, but a picture like this that showed glaciers and mountains and says Alaska and has the bears looking for fish just had so much more going on that it made it a better candidate for a cover than just say your more classic close-up bear photo. So including the environment's an important thing. Like I say, backing up is something I often do. Another thing I often do, and this is kind of a landscape technique, is I stop down for more depth of field. I'll use a smaller aperture, which is a bigger number, and increase my depth of field, much like landscape photo. So here's a picture of a baby moose near Seward. And here I probably used F8 or F11 because I wanted the moose in focus, but with these beautiful mountains in the background, I wanted them in focus as well. So where typically when we're photographing wildlife, we want wide open apertures, we want that silky smooth out of focus background, and I do a lot of this with bears and birds and all that kind of thing. But when you're doing this type of animalscape photography, I find myself using more of a landscape technique, and here probably stop down to F8 or F11 again, and including a lot more depth of field. Now in a photo like this, I typically would focus on the bear. It's still the subject of the photo, and it's imperative that the bear is in focus. The background, if it's a little soft, and I think in this picture it might be, the viewer, your eye is okay with that because even in real life, mountains in the background are a little bit soft, but it's imperative that the subject, that the animal is in sharp focus. So that was focused on the bear and probably F8. This is on Lake Clark and the shores of Cook Inlet. So those mountains, I was using a 600 F4 at the time. Those mountains in the background are 30 miles away, but I thought they added kind of a unique element to the image and the orange sky. So here, because I was using a giant telephoto, I think I was stopped down to F22 to get enough depth of field. And then again, back down to South Georgia in Antarctica, F11, because the penguins and the seals are interesting, but so is the glacier, the hanging glacier in the background. So Stopping down is certainly an important tool when you're using animalscapes or doing animalscapes. And here's a final one. And again, these Gen2s, I mean, Gen2 penguins are really interesting, the way they tend to the eggs and the young, and they steal rocks from each other. But it's also interesting to see the environment they live in, the ocean, the background, and all that kind of stuff. So this was, I think, with a 100-400 at maybe F11. So stopping down's kind of a landscape technique. Anticipating movement is a wildlife technique, and it's an important aspect when you try to do, and you're hoping to do animalscape photography. And let me give a couple examples. This is on Lake Clark on the shoreline, and this is just a beautiful scene. We came to shore here along the Salmon River, and I noticed these mountains in the background and thought, man, what a beautiful backdrop for a bear photo. It was unfortunately, there were no bears around at the time. So we started hiking up this little stream, and lo and behold, there's a bear coming down the stream looking for salmon. And typically when a bear is making its way down a stream, unless it finds a salmon, it'll just continue on down the stream. So we backtracked back to where we could get these mountains in the backdrop. We stepped away from the stream a little bit so that the bear could pass by. And then finally the bear did come down right in front of us. And we were fortunate. It seems like most of the time when you do something like this, the bear puts his back towards you. We're lucky here because the bear actually faced us. So by anticipating his movement, anticipating him coming down river, we were able to get this photo with this backdrop, which was certainly way more interesting than just say the trees. And this is a similar situation. This is in Southeast Alaska. This little stream runs right past where we're standing and into the ocean. And you get bears standing in that area and fishing in that area, and including this sow with 2 cubs. And they were making their way again up the stream. And I thought, boy, the bears love to get in these little flats and look around for salmon that got caught in the ripples. So I quickly changed lenses, went with a wider angle lens, stopped down to f8, composed to get the mountaintops back here, and then just waited, anticipating them coming across these flats here. And when they did, I was ready to capture a picture of all 3 of them crossing the little streams there. Another one of the easier animals to anticipate movement is penguins, because they don't walk very fast or move very fast and are very predictable. These guys were at their colony. They're about a mile from the ocean. And so they pretty much were walking in a straight line, just like you see here. I say walking, but it's more of a waddle. And I could basically run ahead, pick my backgrounds, make sure there weren't people in the background, lay down and just wait, and they would waddle right by me. I could get up and do it again because maybe I wanted a vertical, and I could repeat and repeat. So not all animals are quite so easy to anticipate, but as penguins, but certainly was worth taking advantage of. And this is at our property in Arizona. And again, we had this javelina coming through our property, and I grabbed my camera and his beautiful light. And I thought, you know, he may just go up or down this wash, but if he comes out of this little hillside, that would kind of make for an interesting photo. So I focused, I stopped down, checked my exposure, and waited. And sure enough, he popped into this little hillside. And I thought he might. It was 50-50 chance. But again, I was kind of trying to anticipate his movement and being ready for that. So at Annan, kind of like penguins, it's easier to anticipate the movement of the bears because they all use these fallen logs as highways. So I pretty much know if a bear's coming down for salmon, he's going to walk down this log. And it makes me it's real easy to then get set up, have my composition in place, stop down, and be all ready for them. And outside of Seward, in the spring, there's a little area that we get a lot of orcas every year chasing the salmon. And so same thing, we can set up, drop anchor, and just wait and get the perfect background. And we know that the salmon the orcas are gonna swim around and pass by. And if you don't get them the first time, they're going to swim around and do it again and again. So you can kind of anticipate the movement and get these backdrops. And I'm always hoping to get the breaching orca, but they don't quite breach as often as I would like. So anticipating the wildlife movement is an important technique to shooting animalscapes. Another technique that I use much less so, and that's filters. And I find I just don't use filters as much in general with any of my photography. The dynamic range in today's camera is so great that you just don't need to use filters that much. when I photographed this bull moose on the mountains above Anchorage, this was where the moose was very dark. And the sun was kind of hitting, this was bright where the snow was, and it was very out of balance. And what I used was a 3-stop hard edge filter right across the top of these trees here. And normally if I'm doing this in person, I would pull out a 3-stop hard edge filter and hold it up. But basically it's a clear filter. Half of it is dark. Half of it is 3 stops darker than the rest, which is just clear. And so it helps balance the image. Again, I don't do that as much anymore because with shadow highlight tools in a lot of the software programs, plus the dynamic range with our cameras. In fact, I think my iPhone can now capture this without the need of any kind of grad filter. But I still find myself using filters from time to time. This bull moose in Denali, this was late morning. It was kind of hazy. The sky was hazy. The mountain in the background was a little bit hazy. And so I popped on a polarizer filter. And I think that this might be a little over polarized, but it still gives the example that I was able to kind of save the day by making this mountain in the sky and the foliage kind of pop with a polarizer filter. I would normally never use a polarizer filter if I was just photographing a mammal up close or portrait. There's really little advantage in giving up a couple stops worth the light, so I just don't use polarizers. But in this case, it worked out quite well. The doll also in Denali, and again, I used a 3-stop filter right across the sky right there, and it really helped balance out the two scenes. And this is some bison in Yellowstone, where again I used a 3-stop filter right across here, and to help balance it. Again, don't do it as much anymore, but it's a tool, and if you're used to using those kinds of filters and use them in your landscape photography, it might be a great tool to use if you try to do an animalscape type image. Here's another technique I use, and this is, I mentioned that a lot of you see a lot of award-winning wildlife images these days are kind of the animalscape style. You look at the BBC, you look at like a lot of camera clubs, you see the animal and the environment and the light and the weather and all those kinds of things. The other trend I'm seeing over the last 10 years is a lot of the winning images were captured either with a remote or a camera trap. And a remote, what I think of as a remote is basically a way to fire a camera without using the shutter. So you could stand back 100 feet or 100 yards and fire a camera and watch for things to develop in front of it. And a camera trap is basically a trigger. In this situation, this was a camera trap image, and I had a trigger right across here. So I knew that whenever an animal passed through this area, it was going to fire the camera and my 4 flashes. And so I find this camera trapping and remotes a great way to capture animalscape type imagery and unique images, because you can be way closer. It's really hard to have a wide angle lens and be this close to a fox, much less capture the stars in the sky and a little bit of moon. I know some people will be critical of images like this because they'll say, well, you weren't there to pull the trigger. So really, is it your photo? And I would argue just the opposite, that I actually had more to say in this photo. If I was just driving down the road, for example, and saw a gray fox, I would grab my camera and do my best to quickly try to make a compelling composition and capture a picture. In this situation, I could spend literally hours ahead of time perfectly fine-tuning the composition, the flashes. This case, I had 4 flashes. The fact that this swirl cactus here is dark makes me think one of the flashes didn't fire, but it still didn't matter. It's still, I was able to set up. I knew where my animal would be. It'd be right here. I knew I had exposure for the stars. I knew how everything would be lit. I just didn't know what animal might appear and how it would appear. It might be, and often it's the case, it might have its back to me. In this case, it's looking into the scene, which I think is kind of a neat, added to the image, head up and looking out, just doing its hunting thing at night. So I think this is kind of a new trick in the tool bag for animalscape photography. And I'll give you some other examples. This was captured with a remote. So in this, I have an aluminum case with a glass window in the front, and I put my camera with the wide angle in the water right at water's edge, and then put a flash in the bottom of the box. And at the time I was using a pocket wizard, I connected a pocket wizard, and then I stood back behind a big tree up here and just watched and waited for the salmon to swim right up to the box, and then would take the picture with the remote. And it's kind of a neat picture just because it shows the environment that these salmon live in and spawn in. This is a Chugach National Forest, a temperate rainforest. My ultimate goal, and I haven't obtained it yet, but bears will also come in here and fish for these salmon. And ideally, one of these days, I want to get a bear standing in the water. Maybe its feet under the water, maybe it's grabbing a salmon. But until then, I'll have to settle for this salmon picture. But this was done with the remote. Again, this is the same stream above water, but also with the remote. I could never get close to these mergansers. This was taken with like a 24mm lens, showing the landscape, showing the trees, the river, that kind of thing. I would have a trouble photographing these things with a 600 f4, and it'd be a very different picture. It would just be of the bird and water. And I think this just makes a different, unique image, includes the environment, includes a lot of other things. And so in this situation, I had my camera on a tripod, with a 24mm lens, and I stopped down, and I used a remote trigger. So I was hiding behind the brush somewhere and firing it when these birds swam close to the camera. So kind of a little side note, one day I was setting up the camera just like this. I was almost all ready, and I realized I forgot something in my truck. So I ran back to the truck, got it. And as I came back to the camera, there was bears right next to my camera. And I was like, oh no, I tried to take pictures and I couldn't. I ran down to the camera after the bears left, and everything was laying on its side. And I got really lucky. The camera and tripod tipped over. Obviously, a bear came up to it and nosed it out of curiosity, which would have made for a really cool picture, and then knocked the whole thing over, and it landed on a clump of moss, and nothing got wet and nothing got ruined. So I always think of that story when I see this image. But again, this was a remote, another great tool for animalscapes. This was a little bit older picture with a Canon camera, which has a remote built into your iPhone. A lot of cameras do that this day, where you could adjust exposure and fire the shutter as well. And so I was literally sitting back in camp watching. I had my flashes set up. I was hoping the fox would come at sunset, and I did this over a number of nights. And with that remote, I could adjust. So as it got darker and darker, I could add to my ISO. I could maybe change the aperture. So I would constantly chase the exposure. And then when the fox did show up, I could sit there and grab a couple pictures of them. So and it's kind of neat to be able to see the swirls and all that and have the flash. So again, another use of remote. And then these last couple, these are just camera triggers where I was sound asleep in bed at sunrise when these javelinas came to the water hole. And I have one more here. Again, as I'm sound asleep sleeping, my camera is doing all the work for me of this javelina passing by. So that's a similar spot to where the fox was, but this particular evening I got a javelina. And or a big moon, so I couldn't get the stars. But camera traps and remotes are another great tool for doing animalscape photography. So now I just kind of wanted to conclude and give some examples and talk about basically planning ahead and putting it all together. And a lot of times I go out just with animalscape photography in mind, because I think it is a stronger type of imagery. And here's one example. Down in Frederick Sound in Southeast, I knew it was a great area for humpbacks. I waited for the light to get just right. I positioned the boat to have this great backdrop. I stopped down here, probably F8, and basically then lined everything up and was able to photograph and get kind of a neat picture of this whale diving at night. So it's kind of putting all the tools together, but I planned it ahead of time. Even before I got to Southeast Alaska, I wanted to have this kind of a photo. Another place I think is great for bears and basically animalscapes of bears is Annan Bear Observatory, which just because it's in this beautiful landscape. And if you haven't been there before, I'm standing on the viewing platform, so I'm right against a railing here. most people that go there go down the stairs behind me and they go down by the river. There's the photo blind and you get salmon coming up the river. You get brown bears and black bears catching the salmon, and it's really fun and rewarding to photograph. And I have lots of photos like that. But when you're notice that a lot of the bears would come to this edge and go down this little trail, and they usually stopped right at the top of the hill here. And I thought, man, that's a pretty neat, that river setting and all that. So this particular year, I literally went, stood in the very corner of the platform. I pre-focused right here. I stopped down. I didn't use a filter, but I checked my exposure, and then I just waited. And I knew when a bear walked up, he would pause and look around me, especially the black bears, because they're always looking for brown bears. And I was able to capture this image, which I think is pretty neat. I mean, an image of the bears catching the salmon is neat, but this is just something very different from what most people come away from at a place like Annan. So, you saw this one at the beginning, the Stall Sheep and Polychrome Pass. We were in Denali. I was blessed to qualify for a pro pass. So we were driving the road. It was late evening. We were having trouble finding wildlife. And I knew that Polychrome Pass had beautiful fall colors and typically got the beautiful evening light. So we went there for last light, hoping to find some wildlife. And we found this Wendell sheep just on the hillside above the road, but making his way down. And so I thought, man, I'm going to set up down here. If he crosses the road and keeps going straight, that's going to make for a really neat picture with him in the corner and looking out over all this. And so I got down there, set up. In this case, I used a 3-stop hard edge filter to bounce the sky, and then just kind of waited. I stopped down, probably a little extra here, F11 probably at least. And often when you do something like this, the animal comes down behind you, and there's no photo, or he hits the road and walked down the road. But this time I anticipated his movement. He came straight down out of the willows here, stopped and made for a really neat animalscape image that's been published a number of times. And then the final one that I touched on at the beginning is bison in Yellowstone. And I think I mentioned this was an outdoor photographer. It was actually a finalist for the cover, and it unfortunately didn't make it because that would have added to the story. But we had worked on getting this photo. We had been in Yellowstone for a couple weeks, and I really had this in my head. I would love to get the bison in the meadows with a beautiful sky. And we would drive out to the geyser basin night after night. Some nights, so I'm taking this photo from the road itself. Some nights we would drive out there and it was a beautiful sky, but the bison were all on the east side of the road and it was a gray, ugly background and it wouldn't come together. Other nights, the bison were out here in the west, but there was just an ugly sky. And nearly on one of our very final nights, we got out there and the sky, the clouds were in the sky, the bison were here, and it finally all came together. And this is a rare situation. Probably the only time I've ever used a 5-stop hard edge filter. This was really dark down here where the bison was. It was surprisingly dark, and this sunset sky was very bright. And so I had a 5-stop hard edge, which means I was taking away 5 times the light out of the sky as what was being captured in the foreground here. And normally 5 stops is way too much, but it worked out perfect in this situation. And the line went right across here. You can't even tell. I don't think I used a polarizer, and I didn't stop down a ton because the sky, there's not a lot of detail there, but I think this was F8. So again, I spent a lot of time anticipating the movements, then trying to fine tune the composition so none of the bison were cut off on any part of the frame. And so this was another example of everything kind of coming together. So with that, that's basically all I have, but I would be happy to answer questions if that was to work out okay. But otherwise, I appreciate you guys having me.
We're unmuted now, so.
Anybody have any questions?
You know, the people out there too can unmute themselves and ask the question.
I just want to say beautiful work. I really
Yeah.
enjoy it.
Yeah. It's good stuff.
Very
Thank you.
visuals.
Hey, could you put the your information back on?
Oh, sure. Yeah. Yeah, hang on 1 second here. There you go.
Oh, there we go. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'd love to connect. If you guys are on Facebook or Instagram, let me know and remind me that you were at station, because it's typically if I'm doing them in person, I can connect with people and stay in touch over the years, and I enjoy that. So hopefully that still kind of works with the Zoom thing too. So
Hey, Ron, would you also talk about your desert photo retreat?
yeah, Connie, we have this 10 acres, and the reason I actually took the information out about it, because we're not exactly sure what we're going to do next year. It's a bit like some of the ranches that you have in Texas with the photo blinds. What we've been doing here, we have 2 photo blinds, and one of them has a 12-foot by 12-foot reflection table. So you basically sit right at water level and can photograph the birds coming and going. And we also have this cute little Airstream with a barbecue and fire pit, and people can rent it and stay there for the night. Now that aspect of it, we may not do next year, because we're long ways from laundromats and it's taken a lot of work, but I do believe we're going to still be open for visitors that are staying at hotels. And we have a number of photographers that also bring groups out here. John Greger's here right now. Tom Bull was just here, John Gerlach, and I may do some trips. And I believe it'll be set up that you can come on your own as well. The other thing I do is camera trapping workshops, because here I provide the flashes and the triggers and everything. You just show up with your camera and we set up at night in the water holes. And I don't know what we'll get, but I know that we'll at least get maybe a skunk and a javelina or a gray fox. And so it's a great way to learn, and you're going to come away with something. Literally about 10 days ago, as we were sitting in our 5th wheel, 7:30 at night, I've measured the water hole is 13 feet from the back of our RV, and a mountain lion, a giant mountain lion, walked up, sat down, took a drink, stood up, and walked away. So I'm not promising a mountain lion, but it would be an option as well. So that business is called Desert Photo Retreat, and we'll probably open up for whatever we end up doing. We'll open it up in the fall for next year, but it might not include overnight stays, which is unfortunate because people love coming out here and spending the night. But I think it will include still being able to come out here and photograph. So so I did take that out just because I wasn't sure. And oh, David Carter, thank you very much. And got a nice message from him there. Oh,
I'm putting it in the chat.
Ron, I'm so excited that you got to talk about this, because we're going on a National Geographic cruise, the Inside Passage, in July, I think it is.
okay.
You know, the thorns.
Well,
Yeah.
this you're going to see many of the same places, and maybe you can take what you learned here and apply those techniques on that cruise.
I'm so glad I got to see this. It's really exciting.
Oh, good. Thank you,
Thank
Debbie.
you.
Well, you're gonna have an amazing trip. That Southeast is so beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank
so beautiful.
you.
Yeah.
Oh, you need to have it capitalized.
Ron?
Yeah.
You need to capitalize T, thorns.
Yeah. Somebody else said my name.
Good, Jim.
Yeah.
I-
How much traffic do you do on these images?
Oh, you don't have to capitalize the. I thought you put, have you eaten at thorns? You're putting the
Ron,
thorns?
Yeah.
Someone needs to mute their.
So the question was, how much cropping do you do on your images?
Oh, that's a good question. I used to do none. When I first started out, I shot slides, Velvia and Provia, for people that have been around for a little while. And when I put an image on my website, if a magazine wanted that image for publication, I didn't want them to get it and it be vastly different, cropped or adjusted different than the actual original slide. So for a long time, I never cropped anything, certainly never my slides. As time's gone on, I crop more and more. I still try to keep it a little bit limited, but I don't hesitate now to crop or maybe crop out a distracting element. And nowadays I'm shooting Olympus, which is a 4/3 system. So effectively, I'm kind of cropping 50% right off the get-go. If you can make a point as an argument that way. So I try not to crop because I'd just rather hold on to those pixels. But if it makes the image better, I don't hesitate to crop like I might have 10, 15 years ago, where I would have said I never crop.
Can I ask a question? You talk about using iPhones. For those of us who happen to be Android users, it's the same
Yeah.
thing, or is there something special about the iPhone?
No, you know what? And I have an iPhone, so I just use that choice of words. What I probably should say is cell phone camera. The Android has, I mean, some of those other cameras have, some of those other phones have cameras that maybe are better than the iPhone. So nope, the concept's the same. Everything's the same. Just, yeah, I just happen to use the word iPhone because that's what I have. But no, you can use the same techniques. And in fact, it's nice because your cell phone camera you always have with you in your hand, and you know, where your real camera, if you have one, may not be with you. So it's great. And if you're using this animalscape basically techniques, you don't have to get real close. The bear doesn't have to be right in your face. It could be off in the distance, and you can include the mountains and that kind of stuff. So nope, has nothing to do with the kind of phone at all.
And do you use Zoom with your phone?
I do, and I do. I certainly will use what they call the optical zoom. You know, most phones will zoom to a certain extent with the lens, and then they'll extend past that by basically cropping, and they call that digital zoom. I certainly don't hesitate to use the optical zoom and zoom in. In fact, on the iPhone, there's 3 different lenses. So you're actually switching when you zoom, you're actually switching to a telephoto lens or from to a wide angle lens. So I'm not as familiar with the Android phones, but no, I don't hesitate to zoom. And gosh, with most of these cameras, when I first started shooting digital with the Canon 1DS, I spent $8 grand for 11 megapixel camera for just the body. And now this in RAW mode, I think shoots 45 megapixels, and was 1/10 the price. So you have a lot of pixels to throw away and a lot to work with. So I wouldn't hesitate if it makes the image better. I wouldn't hesitate to zoom. A little bit depends on the final use of the image. But if you're just putting it on Instagram and Facebook and showing it to your friends and doing slideshows and stuff, you know, you can crop, you can zoom, you can do a lot of things. And now with some of the tools like these Topaz AI tools that allow you to upsize, I mean, I think you could take a picture with an iPhone or any cell camera, upsize it with Topaz, and probably sell it for billboard use. I mean, it certainly has a lot more resolution than my old 35 millimeter slides that I used to scan. And those have been used on billboards. So I think people underutilize the value of a phone. And I often get people asking me that, or maybe are not serious photographers, what phone, hey, I want to take more pictures, what camera should I get? And nowadays, unless you're a real serious photographer, a lot of times I tell people, just upgrade your phone because you always have a with you. It's fun, it's easy, dynamic range, it's easy to focus. So it's really a fun way to take photos. I find myself pulling out my phone more and more often, even though it's how I make my living. It's just, phones are just fun and easy.
Same as Ron.
All right. Well, thank you, Ron. We
Thank
really
you, Tim.
appreciate it. Good
Yeah.
stuff. Thanks.
Thank you very much, you guys. And yeah, appreciate you having me.
Yeah. All right, we'll get going again here. Looks like we are down to 7 people.
7 people online still.
Yeah, well, it's counting me and you, I guess. Yeah, we lost a lot. Lost a lot of break. All right. I think I have figured out how to not have PowerPoint create another phantom screen. So let's see what happens. We're going to try to share that screen. Shit. I see the same thing that they see that you see. So I think we're good. All right. So you guys have seen this before. Just places to find us, our website, Facebook. Jim's laughing at me a little bit. Going some stuff that was posted on Facebook from last month. There was a ton of stuff out there. Probably half of it by Chris. But I tried to pull a selection from the last event. Oh, Eddie Ray Porter. I'm sorry. That other guy who never shows up to meetings though. I think so. So yeah, there's a selection of stuff from everybody's Island trip last weekend. Looks like a lunch bunch group out in a remote location.
That bottom picture was, that was at the Thai Island?
I don't know, that's that Eddie Ray Porter guy.
No, that was my picture. I was down at Bolivar Flats.
Oh, I was gonna say,
Yeah.
I didn't. see anything
I took the
like
ferry
that.
over.
I was, it was the same day though. I pulled everything from that, I pulled some stuff from that day. And you look like you're way too close to that alligator.
No, I was.
Across the way, yeah, I figured. So good stuff. I'm sorry I missed that this year. That's always fun, but I couldn't pull away this time.
It was on the other side.
All right. Chuck, do you want to go through the calendar? You mean I can cover it?
You
either
know,
way.
just, yeah, real quick, we've, the lunch, we just had our last one down, had a lunch down there at the, on that last bird trip. We meet every Wednesday, we still meet every Wednesday, and, we haven't set up.
No, we'll get to that.
Anyways, we'll get together. We do get together for real lunches, once a month. If you want. Workshops, we've got actually two coming up here. We've got the infrared photography workshop. I've got 3 people signed up so far, I think. I'm sure this morning. We got enough person right there. But anyways, it's gonna be a lot of fun. I have had more fun than I can miss on this infrared.
Is that gonna be on Zoom?
That is it. And then, it says library, it's gonna be Zoom, and then follow that a
Oh,
week
sorry.
later with the workshop that, Jim Stephens and I are putting together for, iPhone, excuse me, mobile phones. But cell phone, but the point on that workshop, I think it's gonna make it a lot of fun if our speakers for next one, come out with architectural, they're shooting cityscape, right? And so, you'll learn a lot about cityscape. This guy, it's a mix, right, from Los Angeles. Then, downtown. We got a trip to downtown, scheduled for the following weekend. I won't be there, I'll be in New York, but I'll take down pictures. But Jim will lead that trip downtown. So Jim will be part of the workshop, he'll also lead the meeting, and if there's enough interest, we'll meet a week later on Zoom again to compare our pictures. We'll talk about what we took, how we took it, and what the phone worth it, because I think it was that. I try to tell that all the time. I'm glad I had exposed to it. Talking about.
You and I talked about the only camera you take downtown. Yourself here.
Exactly, yes, exactly right. So that whole downtown trip, if you're into the town, then don't take your regular camera downtown, take your cell phone downtown, and you'll do your own cell phone watch. If you want to be, or something, you can take it.
All right.
Well, that's just it. I went out with my big lens and everything. I haven't seen that camera in a while. And it took some nice pictures, I have to say, but I was really tired.
So I'm gonna try to join you for that that virtual session, but swim team summer league swim starts, so it's gonna be a little my weekends are gonna be a little dicey. If you guys do it at the right time, I may already be down there. If you do it during the week. All right, so Jim, I know Randy's not here, but you want to cover any of these? I made some updates based on your comments there.
In May, for a pop-up, I think we're gonna try to do the Houston Zoo. I bought a premium family pass, I'll get 3 adults or 4 adults. But, and they have the new Galactic Island, we did it going, I think that would be a fun trip. No,
So you guys said,
No,
yeah.
no, it'll be a pop-up, but we'll have something by the first of May. And, around top area for June, we're thinking about doing that. July, go back to the Houston Post, the Post building, and get some beautiful sunset, skyline pictures. And then in August, before football season starts, go to the George H.W. Bush Library and put some in. And that, beyond that, nothing. We still have to select. The other thing, over on the other column, 2-day overnight trip, there's 3 of them that we identified. One is to spend the weekend in Austin, You have not to think much about the opportunity to. And then, John, Ray did, courthouses, and I've done some courthouses. We were thinking of doing an overnight courthouse to take you down to Victoria, to Gonzales, to Lockhart, to get some of the really gorgeous courthouse. And then, about 5 years ago, we had about 8 or 10 of us who went to Vicksburg. And that's a 6-hour trip from here, but the battlefield there, the roll down point there, and we're thinking about maybe planning the trip to Vicksburg.
I'll just add to what Jim said. He listed the Houston Zoo there as he was gonna lead, but the rest of the pop-ups, there's no real plan for those, right? There's no real leader for them, so if anybody wants to lead one of those, or if you've got your own idea, or you just want somebody to go with you shooting somewhere, post it on Facebook, call Jim, let us know.
I'm going up to Palestine on Friday, 1836.
Okay,
Horseback wagon races and stuff.
sounds good.
And I opted to, really, at those $75. Because it looks like a rain.
You got a little rain last time, so yeah. And this is Kathy's placeholder slide for the eclipses. One later this year and one next. So just keeping that in there for information. We showed it last time.
There's supposed to be a meteor showers. Several nights. But it's always like between midnight and 4 in the morning. My wife told me.
That's a rough time for me.
I told her.
Although sometimes I'm up at 4 to go to work, but you know. Yeah. All right. So Steve did a thing. He loves me into it too, but he did most of the talking. So Steve and I guess talked to the Cove, craft beer and wine bar down on Hamblin. And they have this allowed us to put up a display of some photos with our banner there. It's in the side room right now. It's kind of our trial run at it. Steve, you can correct me if I. No. The Cove Craft Beer and Wine Bar, the place we had happy hour that time a while back, down on Hamlin and Forest Cove kind of corner area.
What's the time frame when you really?
So that's a good question. We're up to suggestion, but it's probably a little too cumbersome to change them every month. So we were thinking maybe every 2 or every quarter. Yeah, a question mark by that. Okay. Yeah, I guess we had some restrictions there. Their walls are all hardy plank, I think. And so there's nothing, they don't want any holes in the wall really, although we have some push pins they allowed us to use.
I thought we owned some things for hanging. That's it.
I'll say we have the banner up top. Steve Fashion does a backdrop for now. Oh, yeah. If we do, great, because this is 40-pound test fishing line. Yes, so they're hung vertically, one from the next. So you can't get crazy and use some big heavy frame. Those are pretty much plastic frames. The small ones are glass. The big one is plastic.
So are these just on display with notice that you took it or where, that kind of thing?
Well, Steve's have a note on who took them because I didn't get to that part yet, but yeah. He beat me to it.
You're not trying to sell it, sorry.
You can't on some of yours, right? So, yeah. So I think I talked to Sean the other day and he asked that and I'm like, I think I'm willing to, but we don't really have a. Yeah, we do. So probably get a QR code or something created. So I could do that, or if you already have one, you can use one you already have. Yeah, so somebody can scan it and go straight to the website. We'll stick that up there somewhere to give them that. So
I noticed.
Yeah.
Woodlands Photography Club, their business cards.
The QR code, yeah. So Sean said he had a couple people ask. Sean's the owner, one of the owners. I had a couple people ask about the photo club and how to go find us. So could be a good source of some new folks and some other interest. So far it's good. I think this is kind of a trial run. They may be interested in something a little more permanent. And this is kind of in that little side room if you guys have ever been there, but they may be willing to move it to the the main room at some point too. So far good. More to come, but just some general thoughts here. We don't think too expensive because it is a bar. And
Yeah, I mean, that's up against the wall.
it's up against the wall, yeah. Things could happen, right? Yeah, we can't think of the floor, it's hanging from us right now. So these were just some ideas Steve and I threw out the other day just to kind of get us going. So I'm thinking in a couple months, we'll talk about getting a sign up list, and we'll change them all at once. It's probably easier, and column per person, or if people want to do six, depends on the participation, what we get that. So these the first two columns are 8x10. These are all 8x12. Is apparently I don't crop well to 8x10, and then that one's a 12x18.
And each one is individual.
Fishing line goes to the first one, and it just cascades down from one to the next on down. And they're what, $4 frames roughly?
Yeah.
$4 or $5 frames. You can get on Amazon or Michael's. Mine, the larger 12x18s was probably $12, $10. A little bit more, but not too much. So talk about that some more next time. We'll probably start soliciting for some folks to put some new stuff up. All right, so share and learn. You guys kind of know the rules. There's some information here if you want to come back to us on how to resize photos and submit. And that's true. That's true. Yeah, the requirements are a little bit different. We used to need them to be emailable and really small. Now they can be a little bit bigger. I forget. She just wants them good enough to display across that header on the website. Yeah, just don't upload the raw image. Yeah. So I think we're missing. This was the list I created yesterday, so we're missing a person or two there. But I'm gonna stop sharing this, and we will pull them up live and see what is in there.
So what is that date? Is that a deadline? April 23rd?
No,
No.
April of 2023. So this month.
This month.
Yeah, and there's 31 pictures in there total. So. It might take a second, but it should give me everything. Go for it. Now I have to go back. No, we're gonna be all right. I'm just gonna share desktop so you guys should see what I see. All right. Can you see me? You can see that, Chuck? Oh, cool. Perfect. All right. So.
Yeah, should I just talk from here?
My apologies. I decided to open up something else. There you go. Okay. Go for it. You can talk from here. You can come up here, whatever you want to do.
I can start from here.
Yeah, just speak up so we can know.
What's that?
The microphone's here to make your voice.
Oh, okay, well, better up my phone. Okay, so. This is a picture I took. It's just a big puffball that I found. The thing's about, I don't know, 6 inches in diameter. It's like,
That's bigger than I thought it was.
yeah, it's like those little 1-inch ones you find in the grass and everything, but it was huge. And when I first, I took one picture of it, and it just looked fuzzy and you couldn't see anything. So what I did was I went and I pulled out a whole bunch of things on this side so that you could see inside, and so that the ones that are on the periphery, you're getting a sideways view at them, so that you could see the detail there. I kind of had to destroy one side of the puffball, but the wind was going to blow it away pretty soon anyway. So anyway, I figured that was a Texas size puffball. Anyway, this is just some detail on a log cabin.
I just thought, the sunlight was coming from the side and you could see all the detail in the old logs and everything. So I thought it looked interesting. And
It's quite a lineup.
this one is here in Kingwood. It's down by Kingwood Lakes. And in the fall, the cormorants come in. And if you're there early in the morning, you see them coming in about 20 birds at a time until they got a flock of about several hundred of them. And they're all in this great big bunch and they're diving for fish. And they'll dive and then they'll move and they'll dive and they'll move. And first you're seeing, 300-400 of them. And all of a sudden they all dive together and you'll see 6 or 8 of them left. And then anyway, but they're diving for fish and these egrets come and they line up and they watch the egrets feeding. And every once in a while they'll jump up and they'll see a fish and they'll go and grab it. But the interesting thing is they're there for just, maybe a week or so. Every morning they come for a week. And I'm guessing that they just eat up all the fish and then they move on to somewhere else. And
After they dredge the fish, the top there, wow, and every bird on the planet.
okay, anyway, but I thought it was a very interesting lineup of all
Yeah, that's cool.
all the birds. Anyway.
All right. Chuck, I think that's you.
That's me, okay. Texas Blue Bottoms with a Texan and they're taking the painting. I was trying to think where that was. It's a little church. I can't remember the name of the church. It's okay. That was about 2 years ago. Okay, that's Dallas. Infrared. All right, for those people who like infrared. Cityscape. That's for next month. Anyways, that's Dallas, Texas.
Does your iPhone do infrared?
Well, they're obviously out there. You know me. If it's me, I use photo. But what's that?
So does your iPhone do infrared?
You can actually do that. But I think you do that.
What causes the
and that's,
stripes in the sky there?
What's that?
What causes the stripes?
Well, that was me.
Photoshop.
You can't get that effect the very long exposure, maybe 30 seconds or something, if there's a lot of wind and clouds or anything, but I don't have that kind of patience. Okay, that's Houston. From you mentioned the Post. If you go to the Jim's outing for the Post later this year, you'll get that kind of view right there. It's beautiful. Yeah.
Are you watching me at work
This
here?
is not infrared. This is taken with an iPhone, I'll believe it, not in process, but it's downtown Houston. So that's an iPhone.
No, that was Houston.
Yeah,
That's the Hyatt and that's the Center Point building.
it is.
He was stalking me hard.
And the little fountain down there.
All right.
That must be mine. Nothing says
say
Texas like you can buy. Waylon Jennings came up with the world's greatest country song. That's an coming back, I made 2 trips to New Mexico last year. And coming back, this is one where I said, Texas is the #1 wind generator in the country. And what's more Texan on energy than the windmill and a oil rig? That's somewhere out here around the world. That's not much.
Who's that?
Oh, that's Kathy.
Oh, Kathy.
Sorry, I need Kathy's not here, but I do have notes. So Blue Bonnet Cafe, Marble Falls, Texas. Then we have that is her granddaughter in front of the UT Bell Tower graduation. It's still her, yeah. So that is LBJ Ranch in Johnson City, Texas. And we got Mike next. Yeah, these are Mike. Mike's. So grandson jumping over bluebonnets in the mule shoe recreation. Can't talk. Mule shoe bend recreation area.
Very good. I saw photographs online.
Black and white Lukenbach stage. Lukenbach, Texas club. Club trip.
Those buildings in Lukenbach, they ask for that. You're right.
And seems like one of Mike's is missing. So no, I know. I was looking. Mike has one more in here, so we'll come back and grab it. Yep, that's me. That is East End Park. Some morning, I don't know. I always like walking right there at sunrise. It's just always a nice, calm place to be. This is the trip to High Island last year. That is a cattle. Okay. And then probably another place you walk, Chris. Yep, that's down in River Grove, playing with a new wide angle lens I got. And then let me go back and find out if I can.
Yeah, that walkway there was so bad after the spring floods about 6 or 8 weeks ago because it got a little muddy.
Jim, I showed 2 in there for you.
You're not doing this directly off
I am, yeah. All right, and that's Mike's, and he's playing with some new. Got to go back to his notes. All right, Andromeda photo taken in Wimberley, Texas. So he's been learning some new post processing techniques for deep space. So it's pretty neat. Deep space. So check. I selected all and opened them all. For some reason that one didn't make it. I didn't see Pam's didn't make it either. So let's quick cruise back through and try that one. Maybe it was too many the first time. I'll try it again. Maybe preview doesn't like that many. Yeah, it's hidden multiple windows for some reason. We'll just.
Okay, can you hear me? Oh,
Yeah, hold on one second, Pam. I'm gonna get you. We'll just pull them up this way. Did somebody just add one? Oh, Bonnie's didn't make it up either. Okay, we'll start there.
Well, Texas was the deal, and this is unique to Texas. Texas. Market and Texas rivers needs. Around all the.
Oops. Sorry, Mike, if you weren't done.
And this is look across again. We got dinner. It's in the middle of Texas, the West End. And this lady that this van that she parks around all the families around that area. And it has a full boutique inside. So Walmart has come to that part of the world. And a lot of women in that area are working and ranches or what have you. And so much time to shop for anything. So she goes around to the van. And very nice with them. I asked her where she was from. She said, I'm from Perth. Which is just the next town over. So. Yeah.
Try to go 3 at a time there. Yeah, ready. One's a duplicate, so you got one more.
This is how you developed in Iowa. Throughout the United States.
Chris, you didn't get yours today? Try to grab the ones that Chris, shoot.
So I went a couple weeks ago, a couple Saturdays ago, up to the Brenham Cooler around there. There's a wildflower group on Facebook that I was a member of, and they were having a function at a place near the Rosenport. So I got a fried fish, right? And talked to a lot of people and found out there's some things. And on the way, I found these long-horned cattle, and this one's being just said Texas. And then I got to playing with it. I added it with it, and I said, I got this program called Topaz Simplify, and it does like most of the artwork and the impressionistic. So I just played around with it. And I did that.
That's cool. I like that effect.
While I was there, I also found out zebra. There's several of the small herd of zebra mixed in with some Brahman cattle that's not far from. Yeah, okay, so this is over at Shoveler Pond. I went early and did a different route than the group who went to lunch before they went to High Island. And he was just on the railing of, I walked out and cleared a lot of the bird off, like about half of it, or cleared it, and then there's still some heavy brush for, I guess, birds to hide in. But this was just on that little walkway. A lot of
Looks like an admin.
yeah. And this was on our trip to High Island. It was very challenging for those that haven't gone back this year because everything is really growing up, and it's hard to get good pictures of birds and nests and babies or blue eggs or anything. But this one, this tricolor, I think just kind of landed in a tree, and I said, I think I can get that. They're one of my favorite birds.
Chuck, we got all yours.
Yeah. We're on the table.
Okay. Somebody said Ellen wasn't with us.
Ellen is not here. She and her husband are traveling a Big Bend area there in Carolina. He took several sunsets. She told me to send me a note last night, and I told her to send me pictures of whatever you're doing.
That's cool.
There, if you don't let her, send us some pictures. That's what she did. That's from a couple of nights ago. Yeah, she's got a couple of sunsets in this. Well, that area. That one is taken from their breakfast table. Don't know what kind of trees those are. She says one is she says Palo Verde. Okay, and the other is, no, I said Palo Verde, I think that'll. Yeah, the bottle tree. That's a bottle tree, yes, that's right. No, this is.
That's cool.
Yeah, beautiful.
Love those sunrays.
Yes.
This is nice because Ellen doesn't always post.
No, yeah, that's great.
No, she got some really.
I love it.
Yeah.
It's in trouble where you can't see the sunlight and set.
Because the trees make it sunset about an hour before it actually does, right? All right, Emily, I think this is you.
This was a very exciting shot. I had gone down to visit my sister in the Heights, and we went to walk down the bayou there, and there was nothing. And finally, she said, "Oh, there's a blue heron." Yeah, I don't know what those are. And all of a sudden, he catches this massive fish, and he shook it around and flipped it and rinsed it and shook it around. Then he thought it was dead. And I think he was tired of holding it. So he put it in the water, and then this happened. The fish jumped up, and he was like, "Oh my God, I'm gonna lose it." And he caught it again. And then he swallowed the whole thing in one And there's mine. It's not as exciting as the other Longhorn. What was it, Chris had? But anyway, they wouldn't cooperate. They were showing us the wrong side of themselves. So, that was one of the few I got the front end. And this is the new owner of the Rose, Antique Rose Emporium. And he looks so Texasy. He was at the restaurant we were eating. And I thought he had wonderful face. So I just thought he kind of fit with the Texas thing.
Yeah, he's very personal, he's a really nice guy, so if you go out there.
Yeah,
feel
Rose,
free to
Antique
talk to him.
Rose Emporium is a fabulous place. We ought to do.
All right, we got Pam.
I'm here.
All right, yours are coming up.
Okay. All right. I hope everybody can hear me. I decided when I saw the zebras only in Texas, I would make it like a mirror image. Yeah, go to the next one. Now I decided I'd frame them. So I wasn't sure which one I liked better, mirror image or frame. Only in Texas.
Oh,
This
boy.
was on our trip to High Island, believe it or not. We're in the car, we're going from Anahuac over to High Island on that one road that you have. And all of a sudden these cattle came at us all over the road. You can see the cowboys on either side of the road, but they appear to be moving their cattle from one location to another, but they just go wherever they want and everyone comes to a stop. So it's very interesting that day.
Wow.
Well, the guy we were talking to, one of the guys who worked or volunteers, he said that guy will swim the cows across the river or the intercoastal water.
Really?
Yeah, the canal. Yep. Yep. Yeah, should be one more. Okay, this is a Kingwood bluebird, not just Texas. He's a Kingwood bluebird. So
Excellent.
I had to throw that in. He's been around for years at our house and he's got babies now that just came out yesterday. So we're enjoying them.
Thank you. All right, I think that was everybody. Did I miss anybody that submitted anything? Should be the live folder, so, okay. All right, can you see me online, Chuck, still with the presentation?
Yeah, not yet, because I'm still around.
It's okay.
What's the theme for next month? It's kind of-
Funny you should ask. All right, so next meeting is May 16th,
Wildlife.
and I neglected to update the speaker apparently.
The speaker-
We have it on the next slide, I
Yeah,
think, though.
The speaker next month is a gentleman by the name of Jim Nix.
Yeah.
Those of you who follow either Luminar or Neo,
Mhm.
Luminar Neo, he's an expert in that. He's got his own YouTube channel that has a lot of followers. But he's going to talk to us about stunning cityscapes. He lives in Austin. He's written books about different locations. He does like a lot of the dark, the nighttime things. So I'm not too sure if it'll fit exactly y'all's daytime trip during Houston, but he'll do that. He should be a very good speaker.
And so our share and learn is wildlife in your neighborhood. So some of you shared wildlife tonight, but we get to look at some more next time. Whatever kind of wildlife you want. And then food. All right. Well, you just kind of covered this, but this is our lineup for the remainder of the year as it sits today. So Jim Nix, and then we have a couple pending topics, but she has a speaker lined up for that as well. Okay. And then there's our list of share and learn coming. So if anybody wants to grab a screenshot, go watch the YouTube video later and grab that. You can make yourself a folder and prepare. So that is that. Thank you, guys. Thanks for bearing with us through the technical difficulties. I got to figure it out now. I talk.